Hi, everyone. So excited. It is like having it only be once a week is just killing me because I've just got so much energy for the class. So, super excited that you're all here today and ready to jump in with this novel. And it was interesting because on Friday I did a class for teachers, and some of them were asking, like, well, how old do you think this novel would work for? And I was like, well, anyone, right? So let's jump in. I'm just curious about what this book reminds you of so far. So it doesn't need to be something that we've already read together, like in the short story class, but just anything that you've read before, any stories that you've heard, other authors. Is there anything that this reminds you of? Kind of curious about that, because it reminds me of a lot of different stories that I've read. I mentioned the Kestrel for a Knave book last week, but it reminds me of some other ones too. Um, so, scale of 1 to 5 so far. Now, if you've already read the book before, like you read it in school or you read it for fun before, I'd like you to try to give it a 1 through 5 just with your fresh eyes. So, how much are you liking it this time? And Cookie asks, are we doing a thank you starts? And yes, I will be doing those in just a second after I see some of these. So, oh, Erin says, I'm on her TV. I feel so famous. Actually, I think I mentioned in one of the short story classes that I did a couple seasons of a TV show called Child Genius. You might be able to hunt it down somewhere if you want to watch it. Oh, okay, Fiona voted 85 times. That is a 5. So lots. Ooh, Deb Coatney, I'm going to have to try to change your mind. Okay, I'm seeing these. Nice. Okay. Well, let's see. Okay, so some shout outs to last week. So in the comments, remember, one of the things that we're looking at this book through is the lens of, can you really run away? Like, is it even possible to really run away? And I liked this comment. You can physically run away, but sometimes you end up leaving your heart behind. And oh, that was just like, oh, right? Oh, and Juliet says it reminds her of Hatchet. Yeah, that's cool. I think there is a lot of connection there. I can see why you would say that. Interesting. Okay, and then Kurt Kemmerer, I think you can truly run away if during your experience you feel like you have, and if after doing so you still feel like you have. So I thought that was an interesting comment, because it's like you don't really know if you were able to run away until later. Like, it's not something you can know in the moment if it's successful. So yes, Vanstars. And then this one, I like the author drawing the pictures. I have seen pictures from illustrators. They don't exactly match the author's words. I thought this was really intriguing because there are a lot of books that the illustrations are so much a part of it. I'm curious if any of you have any other books that you can think of. The series I was thinking of is A Little House on the Prairie, with the Garth Williams illustrations, and that they make the book. Like, they are so much a part of that whole series. And I was curious if any of you have stories that you could think of, books, maybe series even, that you've read where the illustrations are just a key factor in it. And if you see it with different illustrations, it's like, what's going on? I think you guys are right. I see Simon and Deb. I know I'm using your usernames here. I know your real names, but this conversation of the similarities and differences between this and Hatchet. So agreed. Oh, and Andrew says that the drawings in this book kind of made the head hurt. Yeah, I mean, they're not, like, you can see why somebody would tell her, no, leave the illustrations to someone else. But I do like the idea of the author's illustration, because then we know that was exactly what was in their mind. Okay, and then here, this shout out. So we have one of our own being a little bit famous, because on Friday, as I mentioned, I did that live stream for teachers. And in the chat, I had so much help and so much support from Cookie, who was using her mom's Facebook login, because Facebook's for old people. So it was great. And I just really appreciate that. I gave a shout out in the email list for Mrs. Van this morning, but I just wanted to give another shout out here. So, all right, ready to dive in. So we're not going to have the same plot diagram as we did with the short stories, because we're looking at an entire story arc, right? So what we're going to look at are just some key events that happen in the story. So we have Sam Gribley, 14 years old, runs away from home, runs away from New York City to about 100 miles away into the Catskill Mountains. He finds his family's old farm, his great-grandfather's farm, and through a series of fortunate events, right? And he makes his home in a tree. And so I dug out my tree puppet, and this is our tree, and this tree actually talks. So this is going to be Sam's tree for our purposes. And so he finds his tree, and he steals Frightful. So we're going to talk about that. So we're going to talk about that. I like what you're pointing out about the place where Hatchet and this diverge is in large part the preparedness angle, because remember, one of the lenses that we're looking at this story through is the idea of self-reliance, and do you have skills you need, and what are Sam's skills? And we're going to really be looking at Sam's skills. Yes, Facebook for old people, that's what I keep hearing from teenagers, so I don't know if it's true. Yeah, Simon, hey, there is an email list, and it doesn't cost anything. It's just the email list where I send out information about the class. So let me pull up the list for that. I'll get the link for that. I think it's in the description box, but I'll make sure. I like that this book kind of reminds you of Robinson Crusoe. I like that. And I'm glad that you like my tree. Okay, so I cannot wait to talk about how he steals Frightful, because I think that's one of the most serious ethical considerations going on here. And there are a number of them. So remember, our two lenses. First, our unanswered question, can you really run away? And then what does it mean to be self-reliant, and looking at Sam's skills and what skills does he have? Okay, so chapter by chapter. The first chapter, I hole up in a snowstorm. And he says this line that, and it doesn't take much fire to warm this tree room. And I want to talk about that, because as the book opens, we are immediately thrust into this intimate setting. It's this secret home, this hideaway in the tree that the narrator has built for himself. And as the story opens, he's run away 8 months earlier, and now he's living in this snug home that he's built for himself. And so the first thing that really struck me was this last line. I have my book right here. That the last line of the snowstorm. Let's see. It's not the last line of the snowstorm, but it's the last line where he's talking about the heating the tree and heating the space. And the first thing that really struck me was this, because it made me think about how many things this is true of, right? Like, he's saying, I've got this small room inside this tree. It doesn't take much fire to warm it. And I was thinking about how my husband and I were just talking about this with regard to like finances, that because people debate, there's this ongoing debate among people about whether it's better to pay off your mortgage or to invest the money, because mortgage interest rates are, and lately have been for a number of years, much lower than what you could traditionally earn if you invested it. And so it didn't make mathematical sense to pay off a mortgage. And yet, if your mortgage is paid off, the amount you need to live each month is much less. It takes much less fire to warm your room. And it just seemed like we're confronted with this all the time. This idea that the more you have, the more you need to keep that going, right? Like, the bigger your house, the more it costs to air condition it in the summer, or the more property taxes you have to pay, and you may be more likely to have to hire someone to help you clean it. And just like the more you have, the more it costs to maintain it. It's not just a matter of buying that thing one time. It's just kind of interesting. I just really liked that connection to kind of ideas that I've been thinking about lately. And it reminded me of one of my very, very favorite stories in all of philosophy. So the philosopher Diogenes was eating bread and lentils for supper. And these are what lentils look like if you've never eaten lentils. And he was seen by another philosopher named Aristippus. And Aristippus was very different from Diogenes because Aristippus lived off of the largesse of the king. He served the king and he flattered the king, and then the king supported him. And so Aristippus said to Diogenes, you know, if you'd just learned to serve the king, you wouldn't have to eat lentils. And Diogenes says, if you would learn to eat lentils, you wouldn't have to serve the king. And I think that just captures everything going on with Sam, right? He doesn't want to serve the king. He's willing to eat lentils. And in the beginning of the story, he's eating very little. Like, I don't know about you, but I had to, I needed snacks when I was reading this book. Ooh, I like Jay Sand's connection, like hair. Like, the longer your hair is, the more time it takes to wash and dry out. Yeah, it's absolutely true. And Griffin's connection to the house in Swiss Family Robinson. Yeah. So I just love this connection to this book, that this idea that Sam is going to eat lentils so he doesn't have to serve the king. And anyway, it got me going. So we're going to remember, look at this through the lens of skills. And so all through our study, we're going to be adding to Sam's skills. So in this first chapter, we see some skills. He's keeping a calendar by carving notches in a stick. He makes a lamp out of a turtle shell and oil. That was kind of interesting. And he knows how to make acorn pancakes. So we know that he already knows all of this. And I will tell you that of those three, the only thing I know how to do is I could probably carve notches in a stick. And so I'm like, what skills do I have that are skills that I need in the same way that Sam needs the skills that he has? So there's no problem with eating lentils. I see the Game Hound saying, like, lentils are good. They've just been considered a food that are very inexpensive. And so usually when you're looking at expensive food, people are talking about meat. And so, like, the idea that if you have money, then you wouldn't eat as many lentils. Okay, I thought that, one thing about the skills. I'm going to track them. If I miss any, tell me. And Simon just made me think of it, because he has brains, right? He has brains. And somebody asked for a tutorial on the checkerboard background. Cookie, you know what that is? That's just a bunch of shapes. That's just a bunch of shapes put into a PowerPoint slide. And then I just colored them. But that's all that is. Okay, so I need a piece of paper so I can add any skills that you guys say. So brains, Simon, I'll add that in because I do think that his intelligence and his knowledge is something, and we're gonna keep exploring that. So he describes how when he comes out of the tree, that everything is white and clean and shining and beautiful, and that the sky was blue, blue, blue. And it made me think of how sometimes when it's snowy, if it's overcast, like the sun's not out, the light is so flat. And I hunted around to try to find a picture that would give that light. And I think this one kind of does, where you can hardly see. Any of you who live, I know some of you live in Canada. And if you live anywhere where it snows, I know Jay Sand lives in New York. Like, you know what that light I'm talking about is, where like the ground is white, the sky is gray, everything around you is white, and it's really hard to see. And it can be hard to describe if you haven't seen it, but it's hard for the eye to distinguish shapes and even the difference between the ground and the air. And then you get those days where it's like so bright and the sun is just blinding on the snow and you need super strong sunglasses. And it's cool in the story because it says he laughed because his first snowstorm was over. So everything that he'd been preparing for now has come to fruition, it's come to pass, and he realizes, I did it, right? I did it, right? And he literally shouts that because he's so excited that he did it. And he admits that he had wanted to run back to New York, that because it was like so scary, right? But he says this snowstorm, after it was over, wasn't even as scary as his first night alone, which is kind of foreshadowing for us because we haven't even seen his foreshadowing. So yeah, I'm seeing some of your descriptions of the snow and how that works. And Cookie says Pennsylvania forgot snow this year. That's funny. Yeah, I think you're right. It really is hard to see because everything is the same color. And that, yeah, I just reading your descriptions, I'm really enjoying them. So he says, I knew everything was going to be perfectly all right, but knowing that didn't help. I was scared. I think this is such a common feeling, isn't it? That we were worried about something and we can even tell ourselves, look, it's probably going to be okay, but somehow that doesn't help. And then after it's over, we're like, that was no big deal. Like, why was I so worried about that? That's not even a big deal. And I think this is the key. And I think this is a real self-reliance skill right here. This is maybe the most important self-reliance skill that we're going to see, which is the ability to recognize in the moment that what you're afraid of will pass and that you will laugh at it later, or not necessarily laugh, but you will be able to look back on it later and say, I was totally able to handle that, that we will laugh at our dark fears. And it's hard to do, but I do know that if you can learn to do that, if you can learn to recognize in the moment where you're worried or nervous or anxious, if you can recognize in that moment, this will, in the end, be okay. That's one of my very favorite lines. It's a line that an author wrote, and it said, and all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. And I think if you can learn to live that way, you really can move forward in your life in ways that sometimes if you can't, you just get hung up on. So more skills for Sam. He knows how to make fire. He knows what plants to eat. He knows how to trap animals, and he knows how to fish. GLF11 says when you go on roller coasters, that's how you feel. You know what? I was in a roller coaster accident when I was 16. And I was injured in this accident. My dad and I were on a roller coaster and the car disconnected from the track and crashed to the ground. And later on after that, I grew up in Southern California. My mom took me to Disneyland and we went on the Matterhorn, and I literally thought I was going to have a panic attack. I mean, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was so scared. I think my mom probably thought I was going to have a heart attack too. It was really scary. Okay. So then, he says, I realized that the forest was dead quiet. And this is how he knew the storm was coming. And I thought this one was interesting, right? Because how come the cows are so smart? Like, why do the animals know it's a storm? We always say like, oh, they've got this intuition. Like, why do the animals know? In fact, my mom knows this woman. Well, she heard her speak, this famous author. But when she was younger, she worked in a suicide prevention hotline in an old house in Seattle, in kind of a sketchy area of town, overnight. And it was so bad that she and this guy who also worked there would lock themselves in, and then he would walk her to her car in the morning. Later on, it turned out he was Ted Bundy, who you guys probably won't have heard of, but he was a serial killer. And when they asked her, like, well, now that you know he turned out to be a serial killer, were there any signs? And she said, the only thing looking back was that her dog never liked him. And everybody's like, oh yeah, the dog. So why do we think animals are so intuitive? So I looked it up. How do animals know that a storm is coming? Okay. Andrew says, we find out he can hunt and gather wood based off of his bed earlier. Yep, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yep. Okay. And part of it is a drop in pressure. Yes, Anne Rule is the author. Thanks, Mom. You can go read her book. She wrote a series of true crime. She ended up being really it became her whole career. Okay, so the main way that animals can tell that storms are coming, besides drops and changes in barometric pressure, is the infrasonics, which are low-pitched sound vibrations. And animals hear a different range of sound than humans do. And so earthquake shock waves, ocean waves, things like that, distant thunder produce those infrasonic sound waves that animals can hear. So that is so crazy, right? So that's why the cows are so smart. So I'm curious, have any of you ever had a pet react to a storm or another event before it happened? Have you ever had like a bird get restless or anything like that? So let's see, curious to see. What injuries did I receive? Sorry, Simon, I didn't see your question. I got like a compression injury to my back. So I had trouble walking for a little while after that. It ended up healing just fine. But whenever the name of the ride was the toboggan. And after that, whenever my father wanted to scare me, he would say, toboggy. And it would always freak me out. So curious about any of your dog. Oh, your cat and birds outside. Oh, birds outside. Yeah, birds outside. And this guy, oh, your fish died. Your cat used to freak out during storms, but not before them. Yeah, I think a lot of animals are afraid of storms. So Sam says, this goes along with our theme of, can you really run away? Because in the middle of the storm, what does Sam think about? He thinks about his apartment in New York. He thinks about how he says, I thought about the crowded apartment, but it was warm and it was cozy. And he starts thinking, maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all, right? And I just love that idea of, can you really run away? Well, maybe, but you took some of it with you here. So I think this is a tally mark for you can't really run away. And then Sam tells us about his dad and how his dad did not like living in an apartment at all, that he wanted to live at sea. And then we hear the backstory. We hear this very important backstory of the great-grandfather who owned this land up in the Catskills and had felled the trees and built the home and plowed the land, only to discover that he wanted to be a sailor, only to discover that he liked the sea and the wet and the big and the endless, and that the land, he said, was no place for a Gribley. And the chapter ends with this line, that the land was just the place for a Gribley, that Sam has twisted exactly the words that his great-grandfather had said and his dad. And now he said, no, the land is a place for a Gribley. And I know this moment is key. He starts this story with this scene on purpose. There's a reason, because there's this moment here at the end of the first chapter of this total catharsis where Sam sees this huge difference between him and his father and between him and his grandfather. And this is the moment that he has survived what he most feared is when he realizes what he was destined for. That is what he is supposed to be. It's like, bam, right? Bam. The land was just a place for Gribley. And I know as a reader that now the rest of the book is going to be proving that to me. All right, so next chapter, let me not go too quickly. I get started on this venture. So now we're going to go back a little bit. And we hear about how Sam leaves. So this is what he takes. He takes these 6 things: a penknife, a ball of cord, an axe, $40, flint, and steel. If you could take one more thing with you besides these 6, what do you think he should have added? If you could add one more thing to these 6, what do you think he should add? And so I'm going to look at not just Sam's skills, but how he learns the skills. So we learn that Sam has learned some of the skills here from the man in the Chinese store who taught him how to use that flint, and that he takes notes on paper. Like, do you remember paper? We used to take notes on it. And so far, this is how he's learning. But I'm going to keep this going too, because I think we're going to see a lot of techniques that Sam uses to learn. And he says, and this is really one of the techniques, he plans to remember, right? He says to the Chinese man, he says to the man in the Chinese store, I thanked him and said, this is the kind of thing I am not going to forget. And this is actually neuroscience, because if your brain thinks that what you're learning has survival value, it will pay more attention. If you've ever been on a plane and the flight attendant's like, this for the rest of your life, you know, those are the exits, right? And so if your brain thinks it has survival value, it will remember it. But I think that Sam knows it's important and he values it. And there's a lesson there for us. Okay, so he says that when he told his dad he was going to run away, his dad said he ran away. In the preface, the author tells us that she ran away. And I told you in the last class that I didn't really run away, but I ran off into these hills. I think I told you that story. Anyway, I was going to be gone all day and I ate all the lunch and thought it was like 4:00 in the afternoon. And when I got home, it was 10 in the morning. So I'm curious though, have you ever planned to or wished to actually run away? So, oh, sorry, Kurt. You can catch the rest of it later. Okay, so books, a water filtration tablet, water, a tarp, a knife, water purifying equipment or something. A lot of life straw. A lot of you have figured out that water purification would be really important. Curious. Interesting. That is really good. Okay, so then I'm going to watch to see if you guys have ever considered running away. So I love this. This is a very straightforward story. This is a very straightforward adventure story. It is plot driven, 100% plot driven. And yet, every now and then, George pulls out this amazing figurative language and beautiful linguistic craftsmanship here. So I like you to look at the narrator describes the stream as athletic. It was a clear athletic stream. And I'd like you to look at these two pictures and tell me which of these streams is athletic. Like, we don't usually use the word athletic to describe streams. Like, that's not a common stream adjective. And so if you, and because of it's unusual, that makes it more evocative. So as a writer, if you can come up with a word that clearly will put something in the person's mind, right? Like, we can look at these pictures and know instantly which one of these is the athletic stream. If you can do that and it's unusual, then that is beautiful. Writers, take note. Unusual words used well are some of the most powerful of all words that you can use. All right. And then she follows this up with this cool adjective up with a bunch of personification. She says the stream rushed and ran and jumped and splashed. And the English teacher in me was like, nicely done, Elizabeth. Or Jean, sorry, calling her the wrong name. There is another author, Elizabeth George. Okay, so we're adding in another skill here that he knows how to whittle. And I don't know if any of you thought of the character, the man in To Build a Fire, when Sam built his fire. And Sam built his fire like it was like no big deal. And I thought, oh, that guy could have used you in To Build a Fire. He definitely was good at it. And let's look again at how he learns his skills. We've got the man in the Chinese store. He takes notes. We know he read books in the New York Public Library before he left on his trip. He remembers what he's taught, right? That's key. You can have two kids sitting in the exact same class, and the next day they come back and one of them remembers almost everything. And the other one is like, there was class yesterday, right? You're like, seriously? And then he also learned from the man at the fish market. And he's able to find grubs for bait because he remembers that. And we hear this one over and over. I read, I remembered. And the one about how he was able to gut the fish because he saw the guy at the fish market made me wonder how many things that I know how to do that I don't know that I know how to do. Like, I've seen people do them, so I could probably do it, but I don't know that I know how to do it. And I think that's interesting. Anyway, contrast his attitude with the man in To Build a Fire, and you have the makings of a beautiful essay. You should hold on to that idea. If you're ever asked to compare and contrast two characters in similar situations and how they handled them, the contrast between Sam Gribley in this story and the man in To Build a Fire, and the way that they respect what they hear from others and what that leads to, and then what that says overarching about how important it is to value the knowledge of others. I think there's a lot there. Okay, you're welcome. So then, have you noticed the next morning, everything seems better in the morning? Fortunately, the sun has a wonderfully glorious habit of rising every morning. I was immediately cheered. Have you ever noticed that? Like that it always seems better in the morning? Like no matter how bad something seemed at night, it just always seems better in the morning. Who's Bill? I keep seeing, what about Bill? I don't know what you mean by Bill. Oh, the guy in the story, Bill. Okay, I just thought of it. Yeah, but I haven't got to him yet. I don't think he's here yet. I don't think he's at this chapter. I don't think he has a photographic memory, and I think that what he has is a paying attention memory. They've done studies to show like what's the best method for remembering people's names, because people have all these crazy tricks for remembering names, and they found that the most important technique is to actually pay attention the first time someone tells you their name. That's the most effective of all, but hardly anybody ever uses it. Okay, so I'm curious. It took a lot of patience. What else has to be done with extreme patience if it's going to take? So he has extreme patience when starting this fire. Contrast that with the guy in To Build a Fire who lights 70 matches all at one time. What else has to be done with extreme patience if it's really going to work? All right, next chapter, he finds Gribley's farm. And we get this beautiful foreshadowing. To fish and to make a fire. That was all I needed to know, I thought. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Ooh, we know you're going to have to learn a lot more. So that's pretty obvious foreshadowing there. All right. And then he says, where would I find an old map? The library. And so now I'm just in love with Sam because I love libraries. And so Sam knows if I want to learn something, where do I go? I go to the library. Ooh, I'm seeing your answers come in of things that take patience. Cooking, life, yes. Math, agreed. Fishing, training, frightful. Oh, good. Yeah. Nice. So be like Sam. When you need information, the library, be like Sam. Okay, so then he says, partly because Dad had said to me as I left, if you find the place, please tell someone at Delhi, I may visit you someday. And this falls under our whole thing of, can you really run away? Can you really run away if your dad tells you to make sure that people know where you are so that he can find you? Is that really running away? It's kind of interesting. Debbie Coatney says your library sucks. They practically have nothing except children's fiction. You know, right now, the New York Public Library is letting anybody check their digital stuff out, so you don't have to be there. Oh, my mom is asking me, what is my favorite library? Well, my favorite library is, of course, the Library of Congress, also known as the Mothership. So that is my favorite. Okay, so, and then he builds a fire, and okay, if you have your book, pull it out, and turn to the last page of that, and this is the last page of, I find Gribley's farm. If you have this same version of the book, it's page 24, and if you look at the end of the chapter, it's the chapter right before I find many useful plants. At the last paragraph, look beyond the words. Look at the essence of what he says. So in this first chapter, I'll show you, like right here in this, well, really, it's the last chapter here. He says, it starts, I must say this now about that first fire. It was magic. Now I want you to look at the words underneath that and consider, what is the essence of what makes this fire? My mom says I got the right answer. Of what makes this fire magic. And I think that there is some beautiful writing going on here. Some beautiful craft of like out of dead tinder and grass and sticks came a live, warm light. Ooh, right? That is so nice. It cracked and snapped and smoked and filled the woods with brightness. It lighted the trees and made them warm and friendly. It stood tall and bright and held back the night. Oh, this was a different night. Like the fire alone transformed the night. And that's why it's magic, because magic transforms in a way that we don't really understand. So, so beautiful. There's some beautiful writing in that paragraph. If you're somebody who wants to really delve into writing craft, that paragraph is a really excellent one. I'd encourage you, take something that you're writing. If you're trying to write some fiction, take a paragraph and try to copy this style. Replace the words, but use the same structure and see what you get with it. Oh, so, so nice. It is page 24 in my copy. It's 24 in my copy, which is this edition, but it is the last page of the chapter of I Find Gribley's Farm, and it's right before the chapter I Find Many Useful Plants, which is where we're going right now. So a ferro, Jay Sand says you made a fire last week from a ferro rod, which is interesting because ferrous, of course, iron. So I'm wondering if it's an iron rod. So he says about the hickory, they were gold to me. And again, this beautiful figurative language from her, which I think a lot of people think this is, I've had people say, oh, we read that book in 5th grade. And you could study this book in a graduate course in literature. There is so much in here. Whenever an author uses a metaphor like this, they were gold trees to me, then stop, pay attention. In what ways are hickories gold? Watch for that. Watch for that. You have to think, you have to ask yourself, in what way is this metaphor true? In what way is this simile true? In what way is this personification true? In what way is this adding? Okay. And I think, yeah, Andrew says magic is the amazing things we don't understand. And I think in a lot of ways, that's how the fire, we don't really understand fire, right? We can't really control it. My husband's Australian and they had all these fires. And as sophisticated as we are in our technology, there's still this force of nature that we cannot control. It's so interesting. A better version of Flint. Okay, interesting. So he says, never, never have I seen such trees. He's talking about this hickory forest. They were giants, old giants. They must have begun when the world began. They felt so old. I loved this paragraph. I went and read a lot about hickories, and I found out that they're under attack, by a kind of aphid that they think might destroy all of the eastern hickory in the United States. So if any of you are interested in science and interested in environmental science in particular, quickly figure out how to get rid of these aphids and save these hickory forests. Now, this particular sentence, okay, I'm going to go read about this striker. I'm seeing what Jay Sand's talking about, that ferro rod. Comes with a striker, and you strike it hard and get sparks to make a fire. It's kind of what Sam used. It's a lot of fun to make fires with. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so this sentence, never, never have I seen such trees. They were giants, old giants. They must have begun when the world began. When I saw this sentence, I was like, oh yes, time for some grammar goodness, because we've got a beautiful example of something going on here. Never, never have I seen. They must have begun. This is a particular verb tense in English called the perfect tense. So I think this is the perfect time to share with you about the perfect tense. Do you see what I did there? It was very subtle, very subtle. So the perfect tense is, I've colored the different sections for specific reasons. So I have little Hufflepuff going on here, where the perfect tense indicates a completed or perfected action or condition. And I chose the Hufflepuff color and little symbols there because it is one of their traits is loyalty. And I think the perfect tense is a loyal tense. It's loyal to the action. The word perfect, like in the Bible, you hear be therefore perfect. It means whole or complete. And the perfect tense is telling us about whole or complete actions that have taken place. So we'll get out William Shakespeare. We'll have him help us here. Our William Shakespeare action figure to help us with our perfect tense. So tell us about it, Bill. Tell us more about the perfect tense. And Bill would like us to know that it comes in 3 fantastic flavors. And I put these flavors in Slytherin color because Slytherins come in lots of flavors. They're not all bad, you know. There is the present perfect, the past perfect, and the future perfect, which you will see. I'm surprised. And then Ravenclaw, the last one, because of knowledge, right? No Gryffindor this time. Because to make the perfect tense, the way that you construct it is, tell us, Bill, the way that you construct it is you use have or had, depending on whether it's which one of them it is, past, present, or future, and then a past participle. So let's look at it a little bit more closely. What are participles? You have to know what a participle is. Oh, Jason, you have no idea. I also have Jane Austen action figure. I also have an action figure of Nancy Pearl, who is the librarian at the Seattle Public Library. Yes, indeed. So participles are words that are formed from verbs. Present participles end in ing, like running, dancing, singing, climbing. Those are present participles. Past participles end in ed. So hunted, fished. But if the verb is irregular, then it is the irregular past tense form of that verb. Ran. You wouldn't say runned unless you were 2 years old, right? So ran, climbed, swam, the past tense. So that's how you make a past participle. It's either ed or the past tense form of the verb if it's an irregular verb. So here are examples in the present tense of present perfect. Present perfect. I have finished reading the book. It's completed, right? It's done. It's got a different connotation than I finished reading the book, right? You would say, I have finished the book. And then the past perfect. He had read for hours, right? And then the future perfect, Michael will have read 5,000 pages by dinner. This is actually for Deb Cody. Michael will have read 5,000 pages by dinner. That's the future perfect. And the action figures you can get, I think you can just get these on Amazon. I mean, you can get them anywhere. I bought this one at the Library of Congress gift shop, but you can find them almost anywhere. So look at this carefully because you're going to do it, right? You're going to do it. Present perfect, I have finished. Notice the have form. Past perfect, had read. You have to put that in the have turns into past tense. Have read, had read, have finished, had finished. And then the future, you have to add will. Will have finished, will have finished. Okay, so let's try it. Your turn. Present perfect, I have, and then put the participle form. Past participle form of the verb. Any verb. I have blank more than anyone I know. Yes, I know you could totally read 5,000 pages by dinner. I know that's why I used your name. That's why I used you. Okay. I have blank more than anyone I know. Remember, use appropriate things for the chat, but I have blank more than anyone I know. Okay. So I'll let those go by. I have cried more than anyone I know. Oh. And then the next one you will try is the past perfect. He had blank through the forest. What's something? He had blank through the forest. You've eaten, read. I'm loving seeing these come through. Oh, you saw a bunch of William Shakespeare action figures on eBay. There we go. A lot of you have read. Yeah, cool. Okay. Then last one, future perfect. By the time this quarantine is over, I will have, right? So now we're in the future perfect. By the time the quarantine is over, I will have. So, no, I will have more toilet paper won't work because more toilet paper is just a noun phrase. So what I need is a verb there. I need you to have done something, right? I will have eaten more ketchup. I will have, right? I will have cleaned my room more than I ever had before. I will have read, I will have caught up on all of my Netflix shows. I will have, okay, that will work, Dracon. I will have bought all the toilet paper, right? I will have read 200,000 pages. I will, do not kill your family. I will have gone crazy. I will have eaten my body weight in bread. I will have played hours of video games. I will have gained 20 pounds. I will have lost my mind. Yes, you guys are on the right track. I will have built a fort of Lego. We want to see a picture of that, Fiona. I will have bought action figures. Absolutely, right? I will have played many board games. I will have finished my side of the mountain. Very good, Cookie. Oh, that was lovely. Nice job, peeps. Nice job. Okay, so when he describes this forest of hickory trees, were any of you thinking of the Ents? Like, seriously, did any of your minds go to the Ents in Lord of the Rings? Because mine totally did. Totally did. I was like, oh, this is like the Ents. And then he says, and now we're back to our tree, standing before the biggest and the oldest and the most king-like of them all. I suddenly had an idea. Look, even, I don't know if you can see it, even the eyes move in my puppet. So he has this idea, and that is how we end. And we're ready to go to our next chapter, the old tree. So, has, and that line, I suddenly had an idea. That's how that chapter ends, the last lines of it. Okay. He says, I wanted a house that could not be seen. People would want to take me back where I belonged if they found me. And here we go again, right? What is this? This is, can you really run away? Can you really run away? Can you really run away if you have to build your house? You have to choose where you build your house based on whether people are going to find you or not? Inquiring minds want to know. And I loved this idea. This is the lentil thing again, right? This is the lentil thing again. He says, he's talking about eating these flowers. And I went and found a picture. These are the actual flowers he was eating. And he says that they're all right raw if you're as hungry as I was. Their greens are good, a little strong and milky, but you get used to that. And I think we're back to the lentil thing again, right? That you need less if you need less. And that picky eating is an affectation, really. Like if you're really hungry, there's no such thing as I don't like that. If you're really hungry, you eat that. Hunger is the great equalizer of food. Later, he'll talk about the cattails in the same way. And when an author gives you multiple repeated examples of something, like in this case, that Sam's willing to eat things that maybe other people wouldn't like or wouldn't like the taste of, pay attention. There's a message for you, almost like a letter written in invisible ink. The lentil thing I'm talking about that I talked about earlier on in the class today about the philosophers and the lentils. Okay, so then, did you guys notice that boiling water in a leaf thing? So I went and looked it up to see if it was true, and I went down a rabbit hole of videos on YouTube of watching people boil water in leaves. And it turns out it's like things that make you go, whoa, because you really can boil water in leaf. Like the edges get brown, but you really can cook stuff in that. It's amazing. And yes, those were spring beauties, the flowers he was eating. Exactly. So this is really kind of crazy. And it's kind of funny, Jason, that your sister's watching Survivor, because this is kind of like Survivor Catskills, right? Only nobody gets voted off the island. And then he says, the fire, and he has this idea. Indians made dugout canoes with fire, which of course I had to go look up. And it turns out that it's true. Oops, I must have skipped. There we go. It's true. The Indians did do this. And you know what? I think he can think of these things, like all these ideas are coming to his mind. He stares at the hickory tree and he gets an idea. He looks at the fire and he has this idea for the canoe. And I think the reason he has all of these ideas is because he is quiet, because he's not listening to stuff. He's not inundating with all this stuff. He's quiet. It's quiet in his mind. His mind could think. He's not filling his ears with noise. He's not filling his mind with stuff. And because of that, he can think of all this stuff. He's out here without a phone, kids. Like he's out here. It's so interesting. So how does he learn his skills? The man in the Chinese store, he takes notes on paper. He read books in the New York Public Library. He remembers what he taught. He was taught. The man at the fish market, he learned about Indian canoes. I need to add Bill. I need to add Mr. Bill. Okay, you guys might be too young about that. He learned about Indian canoes, right? It would be sad if Sam got voted off the island since he's the only one there. Exactly. And then he says 2 sentinel boulders guarded a bathtub-sized spring, because he remembered that they grew near a spring. And so he knew that he could find a spring. And I thought, sentinel boulders, that's an interesting choice of words, a sentinel. So I've got this. I went and looked at examples of sentinels. So there is the Sentinel that is an unmanned aeronautic vehicle. So a UAV, the one in the upper left, it's essentially a drone plane, and that is called a Sentinel. It's a spy plane. Sentinel is also the name of flea and tick killer for dogs. It is the name Jedi Sentinels, and then the Sentinels were an Australian tank. There are these Transformers that are Sentinels, and then there's actually a car called a Sentinel. So it's just kind of interesting that all these things would call themselves Sentinels. Sentinels are like guardians, protectors, guards. And so these boulders were Sentinels. And then in similar way that these are. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so time to check in on Sam's skills here. He has all the skills. He can now add, catches crayfish, burns out a tree, and locates a spring to his list of skills. Our list of skills keeps growing. Okay, now what we have is our next chapter. I meet one of my own kind and have a terrible time getting away. So 5 notches into June, my house was done. That just struck me. He left in May, so he's been working on this for a while, and I just love this idea of perseverance, right? I would hope it would hope it would storm so I could crawl into my tree and be dry, right? Like he wanted this opportunity to show off his handiwork, and I love that idea. Like it's almost like, okay, I got ready for this deluge, and now I want it to happen so that I can show, I can be dry. And I'm curious if you've ever done something that gave you that feeling of, okay, I finished it and now I want it to be challenged. I want someone to confront it. I want it to be put to the test. Have you ever built something that made you feel that way? Or have you ever done anything that made you feel that way that you wanted to, I'm going to add Trains a Falcon to his skills later, but he hasn't stolen it yet. So I'm just curious if you've done any of these things. I'm going to need to make more slots. I might need to consolidate his skills. I'm curious if anything has given you this feeling of wanting it to be challenged to see if it was really as good as you thought. Okay, so I added builds snares to his skills because he builds the snares for the rabbits, and we even get 2 different pictures. And then I thought this was interesting. The old woman who comes across, and it's interesting because she's taking the strawberries that he thinks of as his, right? And she says to him, a boy your age should be doing something worthwhile. And I'm like, she's just judging him, and she doesn't even know, right? She thinks she's being super productive. And so it's so ironic, right? So this is situational irony, that she thinks she's the productive one, but he's out catching fish, building tree houses literally with fire. He's catching rabbits, he's catching crayfish, he's doing all this stuff, and she's picking strawberries, and she thinks she's the one who's way more productive than he is. I think it's just such a good lesson in don't judge. And he has trouble getting away. Ooh, Natasha, when you and your brother built a bridge over a stream in a forest. Oh, I bet you wanted someone to walk across it. Oh, that's so cool. Right, you're right, Dakota. The moment is hilarious. She's like, kids these days, right? Yeah, that's exactly it, right? That's exactly it. But there's a silver lining, because even though he feels like he can't get away from her, and he says that right in the title of the chapter, right? But he says he can't get away from her. There's a silver lining, because as they're walking home, what do they see? What do they see? A falcon, which she calls a duck hawk. And if you want a really interesting rabbit hole to go down, go watch YouTube videos of a falcon taking a duck in the air. I mean, it's incredible. These guys can dive 200 miles an hour. They're the fastest member of the animal kingdom. And if you want to get blown away, go watch a video on the YouTubes. They can see their prey up to 6 miles away. 6 miles away. Yeah. Oh, Cookie says, I learned CPR in kids and infants, so I don't necessarily want to test that out. Good point. But this is so amazing because he's kind of resentful of the fact that he can't get away from this woman. But on the way, he sees this falcon, and it gives him an idea. It gives him an idea. And he says, oh, the king's hunting bird, I will get one. I will train it to hunt for me. And that's where that chapter, the king's provider, comes from, right? The king's hunting bird, the king's provider, the provider of food, right? And so I went and grabbed this picture from an old King Arthur movie. And this isn't Arthur, it's another knight, but with a falcon. It's so cool. All right, so last chapter that we were reading was the king's provider, and I'm like, be like Sam, because what does he do? Back to the library. He knows he wants to figure out how to train this raptor, and he's got to figure out how to do it. So how does he learn his skills? Man in the Chinese store, takes notes on paper, reads books in the New York Public Library, remembers what he's taught. Man at the fish market, we're going to have to add Mr. Bill, learned about canoes, and then the Delhi library and the librarian. And now he's adding, not only knowing where to fish, he learns that falcons nest on cliffs. All right, so I had to go find a picture of falcons, and it is amazing. Anyway, this is what it looked like. And when you see the first, I loved this picture because he said the first sign he was close was that he put his hand right in a bunch of bird poop. And I think what's interesting was that after he takes the baby out of the nest, that the mother falcon gets back to the nest, and she looks and she just sees open mouths and she can't count. He says she can't count. And so she calms down. She doesn't even realize that, that he has taken her bird. And he says they can't count. And this made me think about how falcons have a lot of skills, right? They're super fast. They have amazing light speed. They can be trained really well. They're the pride of kings, but they can't count. And I think there's a good lesson here for us. You don't have to be everything. You don't have to have every skill. You don't have to be amazing at everything, right? It's okay to have different skills from other people. It's okay. No, the picture was not from Monty Python. It was from an old King Arthur movie. I see the question in the chat. So then she uses this really interesting word. She uses this word Strubley. And Strubley, I think it's a cool pineapple party word. I love pineapple party words. Pineapple party words are when like the pineapples party because the word is so fun. So I like, yay, cool word. Let's just cheer for the cool word. And in Strubley is like a Pennsylvania Dutch word. It's like an old Amish word. And it means messy or disheveled. Like your mom might say, you're not going to school with your hair all Strubley like that, right? Like that is it, right? So, and that's fine. Like Simon says, I have math skills, but no writing skills. You don't have to have all the skills. Like you can improve your skills, but you don't have to have everything. And yeah, we could all go down a rabbit hole of Monty Python. So here's my question, an ethics question. Was it fair for Sam to take the falcon from the nest? Was it fair? Was it right? And that is our last question. I'm curious about what you think about whether it was fair or right of him to take that. All right, so can you ever really run away? So far, we've got a couple instances where he still had his family in his mind and that he knows his dad might come to find him, which lead us to believe that no, you can't ever really run away. But on the opposite side, he has built a home for himself and he's lived there for 8 months. So that's pretty successful. And then what does it mean to be self-reliant? What I'd like you to think of is, are there any skills that he has that you might need? Or is there a skill you have that you think he could benefit from? All right, so for next week, read through the chapter. We all learn about Halloween. So we'll stop at Wild Potato. And look for, as you're reading these chapters, look for self-reliance and can you really run away? And I want you to think about the importance of names. Sam names a lot of animals in here. We've got the barren, we've got frightful. I want you to think about the importance of names as you look at that. And then I also would like you, if you feel comfortable, is be ready to tell us in the chat next week where your name came from. And if I could interest you in a chat, I cannot wait to go look at your I can't wait to go look at all these comments. Okay, so if you're interested in a challenge, I've got a little challenge for you. I have created a Google slide deck. And what I'm interested in is if you would do a book pairing. So all the instructions are in there. And what you would do is go into this Google slide deck. I'm going to give you the link to it in a second. And you would pair this novel with another novel. And it doesn't have to be something that looks obvious, that seems obviously connected. It could be anything, even tangentially. I'm curious in how you make those connections. And so you're going to add a slide in the slide deck, and you're going to put the image of this book, and you can use that cover that I've given you, or you can go find another one you like better. And then you will pair it with the cover of another story that you think it goes with, and then describe it. And then if you're really interested for a bonus, you could go back before next week and in the notes section, comment nicely on what some other people have done their book pairings. So some of us might be able to add to our TBR lists, our to be read lists with this. And if you are interested in that challenge, this is where you can find it. This is where you can find the challenge for next week. So I am very interested in going to read your thoughts on the ethics of the taking of Frightful. And some of you have some very, very interesting insights there. So that'll be fun to see. All right. So if you're interested in the challenge, go here. If you're interested in just doing, which is absolutely fine, you don't have to do it. If you're interested in doing the normal opportunity this week is to read through We All Learn About Halloween. And I will see you guys next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel. And it is Mrs. Van signing off.